Joining right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Vinnie Iyer of the Sporting News, to dive a little deeper into the NFL draft with me. Vinnie, how you doing on this Wednesday?
Good. Thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
No problem. So I want to first start off with, I was reading your article about the worst draft picks for every team. And on one hand, obviously, we chuckle because, it's kind of like, wow, can you imagine how bad that? And some of those guys were such poor draft picks, you don't even have pictures of them. But it's also a humbling reminder that this is not a guarantee. There's no guarantee that, these 5-6 quarterbacks you talk about or any of these players who we consider top talents are actually going to pan out. In some ways, there's a mixture of luck and analysis that goes into the NFL draft.
Yeah, you're looking at probably a 50% success rate at best for those quarterbacks there in the first round. I think back to the depth we had in the 2011 draft. You had Cam Newton work out at the top, but then you had Jake Locker and Christian Ponder there right after, and Blaine Gabbert. So that was pretty ugly. And then you actually had the two surprises there were Colin Kaepernick. Of course, now it's a little different, but he did lead the 49ers to a Super Bowl there. And Andy Dalton, who's had a pretty decent level of success. They were all in the top 36 picks, and only one worked out very well, two okay, and the rest were total busts here in the NFL.
When you look at this year's quarterback class, it's basically 5 guys who everyone is talking about. And I think most people believe that there's going to be 5, if not 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. What do you think the success rate is going to be for these guys? Because you mentioned many ways it's a 50-50. If you look at 2011, you look at 1999, well, guess what? Not all of those guys worked out. So what do you think the success rate is going to be for this crop of quarterbacks this year?
It's very hard to say. I mean, they're all boom or bust, so you could easily go all 6 being very good. You could have very easily 0 being that good or carrying a franchise. I think there's that much volatility. There's some intriguing depth. That's how you kind of look at it. It's not can't miss surefire quarterbacks. There's no Andrew Luck in this draft. There's not a Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota. There's not even maybe a Jared Goff or Carson Wentz at this point. So they all have flaws. They have things that need to be corrected. It really comes down to not just that player's ability to work harder and improve their game in the NFL, but being in the right system, being on the right team, having the right teammates, having the right coaches. So a lot of different variables step into making a quarterback successful or not successful.
When you think at this overall draft, the blessing in disguise for the teams that don't need quarterbacks is going to be the fact that there's going to be so many talented players, guys who, if it wasn't for the quarterback-driven league that we are in today, whether it's Bradley Chubb, whether it's Quentin Nelson, Denzel Ward, Derwin James, Roquan Smith, you could have all of this talent that may not even be in the top 5 draft picks. They're going to drop down. Talk a little bit about, how some of these teams like the 49ers and the Raiders and the Bucks and the Colts, they got to be drooling right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at the Colts, it looks like they could get an elite player there in Quentin Nelson with things working out in their favor. The Bucks could be ending up with Denzel Ward here at the top corner of their draft. You look at the focus for the Raiders and 49ers is probably going to be on linebacker here. One to help Khalil Mack, and the other situation there to hedge their bets with Reuben Foster there on the other side of the bay. So defense heavy early, I would expect, around the quarterbacks, but you're going to have guys like Saquon Barkley and Quentin Nelson shake that up a little bit. But I think for the most part, the first-round upper-crust talent here, away from the quarterbacks who are not the best players in the first round, is going to be on the defensive side.
What are your thoughts on these top defensive players? I know we talk a lot about the quarterbacks, but look, I look at guys like Roquan Smith, maybe even like a Leighton Vander Esch. You have all of these talented defensive players who are going to go in the first round. Do you think that some of these defensive players, how many of them in your mind are day one starters?
Well, linebackers, I think you can go down the line with them, and you can start with Tremaine Edmonds. You can go with Roquan Smith. You mentioned Vander Esch. You can also throw in Rashaan Evans of Alabama in that mix. Linebacker is probably the least volatile position in the draft because it's a very specific position. What you see is typically what you get there. It's kind of like the running back of the defense, where in terms of knowing if they produce in one way and they do certain things right, they're going to carry those things over in the NFL. The problem is with that also for linebackers is that teams can feel like they can find those guys later in the draft. So, and it's the opportunity cost of what are we giving up now to take a linebacker instead of waiting on a linebacker, still getting a pretty good value and upgrading at a position where there's rare elite talent. So I think it's the safest pick in some ways. In another way, it's a risky pick because you're giving up a potential at another good player.
Talk with Vinnie Iyer of the Sporting News. You can follow him on Twitter at Vinnie Iyer on Twitter. Joining us today on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Vinnie, how much of this basically 90 hours of misinformation can we actually take with us into tomorrow night and Friday, considering that this is the week of basically everybody throwing out all kinds of spin?
Well, I think you just have to translate everything somewhat into reason out of the hype and made-up news, where the Browns, when they say Baker Mayfield, I think that's a way to entice people. And when you combine that with the news of them saying that, hey, we might take quarterbacks at number 1, number 4, that's just to get somebody in there to make number 4 sellable. And when you hear right now that so-and-so pick is up for sale or whatever, every pick should be up for sale in some ways. You should be on the phone ready to listen to all of the offers because it could improve your team in a different way. So I think that's what you have to take into this process. And I think with the Browns, legitimately, they've done a great job of kind of holding their cards well. We don't know exactly what they're going to do. Sam Darnold looks like the favorite still, but Josh Allen could be the guy. And then you don't know what they're going to do at number 4 either. So that's what you want if you're a team. You want to get out enough information there where no one knows exactly what you're doing, and then you can do exactly what you want when you're on the clock.
We know that teams like the Bills and the Cardinals and the Saints and the Dolphins have all made looks at these young quarterbacks. Of those teams, how many of them do you think actually have the ability to trade up? I know the Bills have 2 first-round picks, but one of them is 12 and the other one's in the 20s. It's not like they have a top 10 pick already. Whereas, the Cardinals, who really knows what their overall game plan is? I would personally assume the Saints are going to stay where they are, and there's a lot of talk that the Dolphins will stay there too. So how many teams do you think could actually trade up? Because last year we saw all 3 teams that drafted quarterbacks trade up.
Yeah, I think definitely you have to look at the Bills with the 2 picks because you can still do different things with those picks. You can maybe move a pick later in the draft that slides you up a little bit from 12. You look at the Patriots as well, now having the 2 picks. And they don't have to slide as much. I think they could move into the 15 range to go get their quarterback. So I think teams are going to be very careful here because, like I said, there's no surefire quarterback thing in this draft. So you're going to be waiting and seeing maybe what quarterback falls a little bit because there'll be some of that as well, whether it's Josh Rosen or Baker Mayfield or Lamar Jackson. One of these guys is going to keep sliding to a more comfortable spot in the draft. So I think in general, the ammunition is not necessarily there for a lot of teams to make a too aggressive move up the draft board.
A team that does have ammunition in the first round that usually doesn't have such ammunition is the Patriots. They have 2 picks in the bottom half of the first round. How do you think they are going to use those picks? Do you think they could maybe move up, or do you think they'll kind of stand pat and let the draft fall to them?
Well, I think they'll be very calculated here. I think if you see them go after an inside linebacker and tackle, that means they're pretty confident that Tom Brady's going to be in the mix, at least for 1 year, maybe for 2 years if that's the focus early. If they're worried about Tom Brady in his future near, it looks like he's definitely coming back for 18, then they might go into the quarterback. I just don't sense any desperation from the Patriots. They will be very patient, see if there's a value. I think they'll slide up a little bit, but not be too aggressive. I know some people will say they could move up to number 2, even to make a big move for a quarterback where the Giants are picking. I don't see that. I see them being very calculated about their picks, and if anything more so trading down to improve their haul, which is excellent over the first 2 days.
The Eagles are sitting there at 32, Super Bowl champions. If you're the Eagles and you're Howie Roseman, you have no second or third round picks. Do you sit there and just take whoever comes to you at 32, or would you be strongly looking at moving down and getting a second and third round pick back?
Well, the beauty of the Eagles right now is first, they're Super Bowl champs, so that takes a lot of pressure off. But second is they are not any deficient at too many positions here. They're pretty deep. I mean, when it comes down to it, even at quarterback, we know that with Nick Foles and Carson Wentz. So they can go anywhere they want. They can go best player available. And a lot of mock drafts, including my own, now have Darius Geis going there from LSU. That's a pretty nice addition for the champs when you lose Garrett Blunt there in free agency. So I think they'll probably stand pat here and say, we got a lot of depth, we got a lot of things to take care of on our own team, and just enjoy it and get a very good special player there at number 32.
Who are a couple of players that you look at who are maybe not going to be top 10 picks or maybe not even be top 20 picks, but you say, man, I can see these guys making a major impact in the NFL?
Well, I do like DJ Moore a lot, the wide receiver from Maryland. I actually saw him play in a game. I didn't realize that his trajectory was going to go this far, but put up some big numbers there in person when I saw him, and I said, yeah, I think I'll watch this guy a little bit more, and just an explosive player that can really take over, and I think there's a good chance where he could upset Calvin Ridley or Cortland Sutton as the top wide receiver taken in this draft. And I also like the tight ends in this draft all the way through the second round there with starting with Dallas Goedert of South Dakota State. You have Hayden Hurst of South Carolina, and go to Mike Gesicki of Penn State, and then go to Mark Andrews of Oklahoma. I think all these guys can be difference makers in the position as receivers. I think a couple of them, Hurst and Andrews, might be more complete players, but the other guys are very dynamic athletes, and we haven't seen those kind of tight ends in a few classes here.
Speaking of wide receivers, the Dallas Cowboys, they cut Dez Bryant. Do you think that's a sign that they're going to be aggressive in going after wide receiver? You mentioned DJ Moore. Calvin Ridley's out there. We have Sutton of SMU. There's an interesting group of wide receivers that people have mixed opinions about this year.
Yeah, when you look at the Cowboys, I think this will be a great spot for one of those wide receivers. They have to decide what kind of receiver do they want there. They could use really a game breaker because Terrence Williams really hasn't been that. And what they have left, they could use a Bryant type like Sutton. So you'd think that Sutton and Moore would be an answer. And then Calvin Ridley, they missed a guy that just does the dirty work and catches those passes all over the field. They've had Cole Beasley in the slot, but you could use someone else. So wide receiver would be an excellent pick for the Cowboys. I think they have to lean more that way. Another way they could look at is maybe inside linebacker or defensive line. But I think right now you have to lean toward a wide receiver.
You know, we always focus on the first round of the draft, but the second and third round, that's where teams are really built. It's the later rounds. And one of the things I enjoyed is you put up your articles about the best 7th and 6th round picks. In your mind, who are the GMs in this league who have done the best job at finding quality talent in the later rounds?
Well, you got to go with the guys that are always seeming to pick last in the first round. And you look at, I think Kevin Colbert there at Pittsburgh does a great job. I think Rick Spielman has done an excellent job in Minnesota as well, pick by pick. We know Bill Belichick and his staff with Nick Caserio, they've consistently found sometimes better values in the later rounds than they have early in drafts. So you start with the winning teams, and then Mickey Loomis, you can follow him there as well in New Orleans. So these consistent winning teams, it's no surprise they're getting the most bang for their buck over 7 rounds of the draft, and not just worried about round 1.
He is Vinnie Iyer. You can follow him on Twitter at Vinnie Iyer. He's up to Sporting News. Check out his articles. Some fun stuff there with each team's worst draft pick. You can see who the Eagles' worst draft pick is. The guy was so big he doesn't even have a picture on the slideshow there on the website. So, Vinny, appreciate the time here on a Wednesday and enjoy the draft this weekend.
All right. Thanks a lot, Josh. Have a good one.